Before we begin, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Enjoy the show!
Night spilled across the observatory like ink. The air trembled with quiet electricity, the kind only found when the universe holds its breath. Lira stood before the great telescope, her fingers tracing the cold brass. For years she had studied the stars not as gods but as patterns, data, light curves, geometry. Yet that night the stars were no longer silent. She saw it between two constellations, a pulse of silver light, rhythmic, deliberate. It flickered once, twice, then vanished. But in the darkness that followed she heard something, not with her ears but with her mind. A whisper that didn't use words yet carried meaning clear as her own breath. What you seek above already stirs below. Lira froze. The words vibrated through her chest. The hum of the telescope grew louder as if responding. She turned the lens toward the coordinates, her heart pounding. But the stars had returned to stillness. Only the reflection of her own eye stared back from the glass, black pupil, ringed with starlight. That night she dreamed of a mirror suspended in the cosmos. Its surface rippled like water, reflecting not her face, but endless constellations folding inward. A voice, ancient and soft, whispered from within, as above, so within, you are the sky you watch. She woke before dawn, trembling. On her desk, the telescope log blinked, 3:33. 3's the number of correspondence. Coincidence, perhaps, but something deeper stirred. Lira opened her notebook and, for the first time in her scientific career, wrote not an equation, but a question. If the universe reflects us, what am I showing it? Outside, the horizon bled into gold. The stars faded, but their echo lingered in her chest, a promise she could neither explain nor ignore. For days after the vision, Lira's mind pulsed with unease. The whisper from that night echoed through her thoughts, soft but insistent. As above, so within. At first, she dismissed it as fatigue, a trick of late hours and sleeplessness. But the world around her began to tilt in quiet, impossible ways. The cafe she always passed on her morning walk had changed its sign overnight. It now read, "The Mirror, Sedge." The woman at the counter, who had never spoken to her before, greeted her with a curious smile. "You early," she said. "The stars must, kept you away." Lira froze. How did you know that?" The woman only shrugged. People who stare at the heavens always wear that look, like they've just been spoken to. Lira laughed uneasily and left, but the phrase followed her like perfume. That afternoon she returned to the observatory to review her data from the night of the vision. No record of the light pulse existed. The telescope's log showed static between 3:32 and 3:34. The system had simply gone blank. Yet when she magnified the raw capture file, a faint image shimmered between the frames, a geometric pattern almost too subtle to see. Concentric circles interwoven with spirals, like the iris of an eye. Her pulse quickened. She referenced the pattern with astronomical databases, but no star cluster matched. Instead, the shape appeared in something far older, a medieval manuscript known as the Codex of Aiden, an obscure text on Hermetic philosophy. Beneath the same pattern, a line was inscribed in faded ink. "The mirror of heaven reflects the mirror of man. To find one, seek the other." Lira leaned back, heart pounding. The coincidence felt too precise, too personal. She jotted the library reference in her notebook and whispered to herself, "If the universe wants to speak, I'll listen." The next morning, she boarded the first train to the capital's old archives, unaware that someone else had accessed the same text just hours before. The capital's archive loomed like a cathedral of silence, its vast marble steps veined with time, its doors carved with constellations half erased by centuries of wind. Inside, the air smelled of dust, cedar, and forgotten dreams. Lira's footsteps echoed as she approached the reception desk. An elderly attendant looked up, eyes pale as smoke. "I am here for the Codex of Aiden," Lira said. The attendant hesitated, fingers tracing the counter. "Sworn edge. Few ask for that one anymore. You'll want the basement room 9. Room 9 was dim and cold, lit only by a single lamp that painted the shelves in gold. There, seated at a wooden table, was a man whose presence felt older than the room itself. His long coat was dusted with chalk, and his eyes, calm, unreadable, reflected the same pattern Lira had seen in her telescope. "You come late," he said without looking up. "The Codex has been waiting." Lira blinked, waiting for me. For anyone who still listens. He gestured to the open book before him. Most read with their eyes. "The Codex prefers listeners." She sat, the leather chair groaning under her weight. The parchment pages shimmered faintly, as though alive with internal starlight. Symbols intertwined, circles, spirals, and a line of script that pulsed faintly when she glanced at it. "What does it mean?" she asked. The man smiled. "It speaks of the first correspondence, the mirror of creation. The ancients taught that every thought, every act, casts a reflection somewhere in the cosmos. That is the law." He turned a page. A drawing revealed two hands touching through a veil of light, one descending, one rising. "As above, so below," he murmured. "But the Codex adds a third phrase few remember." He wrote it slowly across a scrap of paper and slid it toward her. "As within, so becomes. The universe does not merely reflect," he said. "It continues your gesture. Whatever you are within, it becomes." Lira stared at the words, a chill running through her. For the first time, she felt the weight of her own thoughts, the silent power of every inner motion shaping the world beyond her sight. The archivist's lamp flickered, its flame swaying as though stirred by an unseen breath. Lira leaned forward, drawn toward the pages that shimmered faintly beneath his hand. "The Codex of Iden," he said, "is not merely a book. It's a mirror disguised as ink. Look closely, and you'll see yourself between its symbols." He turned the parchment toward her. Across the page, intricate geometry unfolded. Spirals wrapped in circles, triangles nested within squares, patterns repeating infinitely inward. "It's fractal," Lira whispered. The archivist nodded. "Precisely. The ancients understood what modern physics only hints at. Reality is self, similar at every scale. The atom and the galaxy are the same dream, seen through different eyes." Lira traced one of the spirals with her finger. For a moment, she swore it moved. Not outward, but inward, pulling her gaze toward its center. Within it, faint as breath, she glimpsed something astonishing. A pattern that mirrored the folds of the human brain, the curve of a seashell, the swirl of a distant nebula. "It's all connected," she murmured. "Connection is only the surface," the archivist replied. "What binds all is reflection. The universe is a living geometry of correspondence, a sacred conversation between spirit and matter. You and the stars are lines of the same equation." He rose, moving toward an old cabinet of scrolls. "Each symbol in the Codex corresponds to a plane of existence, physical, mental, and divine. When these are aligned, harmony emerges. When they fracture, so does the world." He handed her a parchment marked with 3 interlocking circles, one inscribed with the sun, one with an eye, and one with a heart. "This," he said, "is the geometry of the soul. It teaches balance, that the heart is the lens through which heaven and earth recognize each other." Lira stared at the design, feeling its rhythm pulse behind her ribs. For the first time, she understood why her telescope's data had gone blank. The universe had not malfunctioned. It had mirrored her inner silence. "The sky speaks," the archivist whispered, "but only in the language you dare to feel." That night, Lira could sleep. The Codex's symbols replayed in her mind like constellations rearranging themselves behind closed eyes. When she finally drifted off, the dream returned, the one she thought had ended. She stood in a vast, starlit ocean. The water was black glass, reflecting galaxies above. Every ripple mirrored her breath. Every heartbeat sent light spiraling across the waves. At the horizon, a colossal mirror rose from the sea, its surface fluid and alive. Her reflection wavered within it, not as she knew herself, but as countless versions of her. Child, elder, shadow, light. Each figure whispered something she could not quite hear. Then one stepped forward, a version of herself cloaked in luminous white. "Why do you seek the sky?" the reflection asked, "when you've carried it in your chest since birth." Lira tried to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. The mirrored version smiled gently. "The stars above and the neurons within fire in the same rhythm. To know one, you must breathe with both." The mirror began to dissolve into vapor, revealing the night sky beneath. "The Codex," the voice continued, "was written by those who remembered the dream, the truth that matter is the shadow of thought. To awaken, you must remember too." Lira reached out, touching the liquid glass. The moment her fingers met it, A surge of warmth filled her body. Images cascaded before her eyes. The spiral of a galaxy, the curve of a fingerprint. The swirl of a hurricane. The pattern of veins beneath her skin. All identical, all singing the same silent geometry. She gasped and awoke with tears on her cheeks. The dawn light cut through her curtains like a blade, and for a brief moment, her room shimmered as if underwater. On her desk, the parchment from the archivist lay open, and though she hadn't touched it since, a new line of ink now shimmered at the bottom. The dream is not illusion. It is the bridge. Morning bled slowly into gold. Lira sat by her window, the codex parchment glowing faintly in the soft light. The words, "The dream is not illusion. It is the bridge," pulsed like a heartbeat, as if the page itself were breathing. Her fingers trembled. The night's vision had left a residue, not fear, but a strange, lucid awareness. The walls, the air, even the dust motes drifting through sunlight seemed alive, responding to her focus. When she exhaled, they shimmered faintly, as though bending to the rhythm of her breath. She whispered to herself, testing the impossible. If thought reflects matter. Her teacup rattled gently on the table, just once, but enough to still her completely. She reached toward it, then drew her hand back. Coincidence? Surely. Yet something in her chest whispered otherwise. By noon, she was back at the observatory. The sky outside was blinding. The telescope, S-dome humming with quiet electricity. When she powered the instruments, she noticed an anomaly. The same coordinates that had gone dark before now glowed brighter than any nearby star. But as she adjusted the lens, the image changed, not into stellar data, but into patterns of light that moved with her breathing. The rhythm of her pulse rippled across the display. She gasped, stepping back, and the light dimmed instantly. "It's responding," she whispered. To me, the realization struck like lightning through water. The line between observer and observed had dissolved. The bridge between inner and outer had opened, and she stood trembling on it. Lira reached for her notebook and wrote in hurried strokes. "The universe is not watching us. It's conversing." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, though the forecast had promised clear skies. The wind rattled the windows, and for a fleeting moment, the clouds formed the shape of a great spiral, the same one from the codex. The storm broke suddenly, yet gently, as though the sky itself were exhaling. And in that breath, Lira felt it, the unmistakable truth that she had crossed the threshold. The reflection was no longer separate. The storm rolled in with an eerie grace, as though the heavens were speaking in a forgotten dialect of thunder and light. Lira stood by the observatory window, watching rain streak the glass like silver veins. Each flash of lightning illuminated the spiral pattern she had drawn earlier, glowing faintly on the edge of her desk. When she whispered, "What are you trying to tell me?" the air itself seemed to pause. A long silence, and then a low rumble answered. Distant yet deliberate. Her pulse quickened. She knew storms. She'd grown up chasing them across open plains with her father, cataloging their symmetry and power. But this was no meteorological accident. The lightning struck in sequence, each bolt following the rhythm of her breath, the pulse of her heartbeat. Lira stepped outside, rain soaking her clothes instantly. The air tasted metallic and alive. She raised her hands toward the swirling sky. "If you are the mirror," she said, "then show me what I carry inside." The wind rose sharply. For a moment, every drop of rain hung suspended in midair, frozen in luminous stillness. Then the thunder spoke again, not as sound, but as vibration in her chest, a resonance she felt more than heard. "You are the storm and the stillness. You are the dream that dreamed itself awake." The words unfurled through her like a current. The ground trembled. Above, the lightning converged into a single radiant column, spiraling upward into the clouds. Inside that light, she glimpsed something impossible. Faces, symbols, fragments of thought, reflections of herself multiplying infinitely outward. And then, silence. When the storm finally broke, the sky was crystalline. Every star visible, every constellation clearer than she had ever seen. The observatory lights flickered back to life, the telescope still humming softly, as though nothing extraordinary had happened. But Lira knew. The storm had spoken in the oldest language, the one written before words, before light. She stood there in the damp grass, trembling but unafraid, whispering to the wind, "I hear you." The night after the storm, Lira sat wrapped in a blanket. The observatory lights dimmed to amber. Sleep refused her. The stars outside gleamed with unnatural clarity, as though freshly polished by creation itself. Every few minutes, a flicker crossed her vision, shapes forming at the edge of sight, dissolving before she could name them. A sense of dialogue filled the air, quiet but steady. It was like being inside a thought too vast to belong to one mind. On the desk, the Codex of Iden remained open to the page of the three circles. Their ink glimmered faintly, then brightened. Lira leaned closer. Inside the circles, the symbols shifted. The sun became an eye. The heart turned into a spiral. Between them, faint letters appeared, arranging into words she did not recognize. She whispered them aloud, carefully. Sol in corda speculum in silo. The translation formed in her mind without effort. The sun in the heart, the mirror in the heavens. As the phrase left her lips, the air thickened, warm, vibrating, filled with the scent of ozone and petrichor. A pulse ran through the observatory floor, then through her body. Images burst behind her eyelids, a stone temple under a canopy of stars, its pillars carved with the same fractal spirals. A river flowed beside it, reflecting constellations that were not of Earth. A voice whispered, "The same timber as the storm. Go where the mirror first touched water." Lira jolted awake, breath uneven. The vision lingered, crystalline in detail. She reached for her map drawer, tracing rivers across continents, following intuition more than logic. And then she saw it. A site marked the Lake of Iden, a remote crater lake long closed to the public. Her fingers trembled as she circled the name. The archivist. Words echoed in her mind. Each page of the codex corresponds to a place, an echo between worlds. The stars outside flared once, as if in confirmation, somewhere deep within, she knew. This was not a symbol. It was an invitation. Long-form script pro said, "The journey took 2 days by train, then another by foot. The path wound through mist and pine, climbing toward the mountains where the air grew thin and sharp. Each step felt guided by something unseen. A rhythm beneath her own heartbeat. A pull that whispered closer." By dusk on the third day, Lira reached the ridge. Below her stretched a vast crater, and at its center, the Lake of Iden. It shimmered like molten glass, perfectly still despite the mountain wind. The water reflected not the clouds above, but stars, bright, shifting, alive. She descended slowly, the scent of cedar and rain thick in the air. As she neared the shore, her reflection bent across the surface, not fractured, but multiplied. Countless versions of herself moved in perfect synchrony. When she lifted her hand, so did they, delayed by a heartbeat like echoes across time. The Codex parchment fluttered in her coat pocket. Lira knelt and opened it. The ink pulsed faintly again, bleeding into new shapes. The three circles merged into one, forming a single luminous eye. Beneath it, a line of text appeared. "Here the heavens remember their reflection." She whispered the words. The lake's surface rippled, outward, concentric rings forming geometric patterns, too precise to be random. The spiral from her telescope, the storm, the codex, all woven now into the living mirror before her. Wind rose around her, carrying a low hum, not sound but resonance, like a chord played on the strings of the world. The stars above shifted, aligning into a perfect circle directly overhead. Then, without warning, the mirror broke, not the lake itself, but her reflection, splitting into thousands of shards, each one showing a moment from her life. Laughter, fear, solitude, wonder, all of them bound together by a single thread of light running through every image. She gasped as the pieces swirled back toward her, merging into her chest with a warmth that made her stagger. In that instant, she felt it, the totality of herself reflected in the cosmos. No longer separate. And somewhere in the distance, a voice she recognized murmured softly, "The bridge has opened." The ripples around Lira grew still again, as if the lake had sighed. Beneath the glassy surface, faint lines of light began to appear. Geometric veins glowing softly, forming patterns identical to those in the codex. Circles within spirals, triangles within hearts. The water was no longer water, it was a map. Lira stepped forward until the lake reached her knees. The chill was gone, it felt warm, alive. The light expanded beneath her feet, revealing steps carved of smooth stone descending into the depths. She hesitated. The voice inside her whispered, "As within, so becomes." With that, she descended. The world above blurred into silence. Below, an immense chamber opened, untouched by time. Pillars rose like frozen lightning, each etched with symbols that pulsed in rhythm with her breath. At the center stood a mirror, vast, circular, hovering above a pedestal of crystalline rock. Its surface shimmered not with reflection, but with memory. She approached. The closer she came, the louder the resonance grew. The same chord she heard in the storm, the same pulse from the stars. "Is this the source?" she whispered. And then the mirror spoke, not in words but in knowing. Images unfolded, galaxies swirling into being, rivers forming the veins of the earth, human hearts beating in time with stars. Every birth, every death, every thought, one endless rhythm. She saw herself not as Lira the astronomer, but as part of that rhythm, the universe learning to recognize its own face. Tears blurred her vision. "So the cosmos watches through us," she said softly. The mirror brightened, then dissolved into a mist of golden light that swirled around her. The voice within the light murmured one final truth. "You are not beneath the stars, nor beyond them. You are their language made flesh." When she opened her eyes again, she was back on the shore. The lake was silent, serene, reflecting dawn. In her hands rested the codex, but its pages were blank now, save for one new line, etched in fresh ink. "As above, so within, as within, so becomes." Lira closed the book, smiling through tears. The world around her shimmered with quiet understanding. The sky, the water, her heartbeat, all one vast conversation. As she turned to leave the lake behind, she whispered to the wind, "Thank you for listening." And somewhere far beyond the clouds, the stars seemed to shimmer in reply.